And good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Jay's Corner. I'm glad to have you guys back, man. I feel like it's been a minute. Again, for those who didn't know, I kind of stepped away as my family buried my uncle. And so again, as always, I thank you for the calls, the text messages, and also thank you for the continued support here on Jay's Corner, where we always talk about being allies instead of adversaries. And so thank you guys for continuing to support. But look, we are back today. And I think, as always, we have another great one. What are we talking about today? Well, we're going to talk about the ultimate glitch in the human system, the super quiet power. You may have heard these terms or these two letters that we're going to use tonight, but tonight we're going to frame them as the quiet superpower that we all have heard of, but do we know how to use? Why emotional intelligence beat IQ every time. Now, you guys know I love logic, right? You know I love data. My whole book, Think Better to Be Better, is entirely about taking control of that cognitive engine in your head. But let's be brutally honest for a second. Sometimes even the absolute best engine stalls out in the driveway. Now, we've all been taught to worship logic, right? That's what we get our jobs. That's what we base our careers off of. That gets us into certain doors, which we'll talk about later. But our society defines success by how fast your brain can process computations. But think about this. If pure logic was the answer to everything, the smartest people in the world would never get divorced. They never get fired. And they certainly wouldn't be arguing with strangers at 2 a.m. on the internet. There is a massive friction point between what makes logic sense and what actually happens in reality. And that friction is exactly what we're going to be conquering today. So, in a world where machines can run your numbers faster than you can blink, your unique human intelligence isn't your brain, it's your heart. And I want you to think about that for a second. Oftentimes, and it's become even more and more popular in today's society, we minimize real emotions, showing emotions. Some people, dare I say, I'm not showing any emotion at all. And so what we do, we try to supplement emotions that should come from the heart with our logic. So we off the bat try to replace emotional intelligence with our IQ. And it just doesn't work, because even if I know what to do, I have all the book sense in the world, I can logically break it down in the whole 9 yards. If I can't apply it, if I can't convey it to another human being, then what good is my IQ? And so I want us, as we go through tonight's episode, let's revisit how we're positioning emotional intelligence, the ability to show emotions, over the fact that we know. And I think we'll see that there should be, at the very least, a balance, if not more important, those emotional intelligence, or our ability to deal with our emotions in an intellectual way, should reign supreme, no matter whether we're in the corporate room or even when we're by ourselves. So we're going to kind of reframe that. So it's 2026, right? Imagine that your IQ is your hard drive, but your emotional intelligence is the operating system. And a multi-petabyte hard drive with a buggy operating system is just a really expensive paperweight. That's all it is. So that's why today's episode is titled The Quiet Superpower: Why Emotional Intelligence Beats IQ Every Time. We're breaking down the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence and showing how they dictate your success in the boardroom, in your living room, and the silent conversations you even have with yourself. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's deal with our first segment that we're going to entitle Decoding the Brain-Heart Divide, right? Because as I said earlier, a lot of times I see people separating the two, or at least turning off the heart part of it altogether. So let me just go by what I know. right? If this is what I know, then I act on. I'm gonna skip over those actual emotions, and ultimately we interpret other people should do the actual same thing, which is scary all in itself. But I digress. So let's break down this divide. Right, on one side you have IQ. For those who don't know, that stands for intelligence quotient. That's your logic. That's your memory. Your problem solving speed. These are the ones that we love to praise, right? But let's be real. Q is just a baseline, right? That's just the cover charge to get you in the room. Now, once you're in the room, you've already paid in the door. What you gonna do when you're in the room? How do you operate once you're in the room? Who to talk to? How do you talk to those who are in the room? That's where your emotional intelligence is going to come in at, which is that other side, EQ. You'll see those two letters together, which stands for emotional intelligence. Now, this is the foundation of how you actually navigate the world once you're inside the room, right? So it just don't mean just because you paid your entryway into the party that you're going to enjoy that party. No, some other things going to have to happen, or you paid your way in the room, so now that you've actually made it. It's important to understand, though, and we're going to take our time. I have some notes here to really understand what emotional intelligence is, because I think a lot of people frown on it. I think a lot of times in our conversations, we leave this topic out altogether. You know, we can talk wit, we can talk knowledge, we can talk accomplishments, but we don't have a framework of what emotional intelligence is. And so emotional intelligence is really built on 4 distinct pillars. And I'm going to go through them one by one, because they're going to really serve the foundation and the framework that hopefully we're going to go all the way from the corporate room. We're going to go down the path of relationships, not only just the romantic ones, but family. But then we're going to even end on how we even communicate with ourselves. So it's going to be very important that we understand, at the very least, the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence. And there are very 4 distinctive pillars. And you're going to hear from me referring to these throughout the night: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. So again, we're not going to go into an exhaustive topic into these, but you can definitely get into more detail with them within my book, Think Better to Be Better. It's one of the first chapters that I open up with, and I use that as a foundation in understanding our emotions, our interaction, not only with ourselves, but the different relationships that we find in our lives, from family, from coworkers, from romantic relationships. So let's start with this first one. And I think this is the one why it's so important to kind of establish a foundation, because this is the one that I see people do the most damage on. Most people look externally to validate their actual emotions, which that off the bat lays the foundation. The dominoes already done fell wrong, right? So that first one, and it's pretty much self-explanatory, but we're going to really dig into it: self-awareness. Now, this is the foundation: recognizing your own emotions, your own triggers, and their impact on your behavior. I'll say that again. The foundation: recognizing your own emotion, your own triggers, and the impact on your own behavior. So that means even if someone have done you wrong, you still have to be aware of how you are distributing, how you feel in return. Now, the second one, self-management. Now that we're aware, we don't just get the freedom to do whatever we feel or justify, well, you did this to me, well, that's the reason why. There has to be some self-management. And self-management involves controlling impulsive reactions. Controlling those impulsive reactions. You did this, so I'm going to do that. You know, I think we talked about it in one of our past episodes. It's almost like you're going tit for tat, if you will. So self-management is about controlling those impulsive behaviors, managing emotions. Put a bullet point there. Not just identifying how you feel, not just being able to tell you, I'm going to tell you how I feel. It's actually involving managing those emotions and adapting to changing circumstances. So all of our emotions just don't fit, right? We can't treat mama like daddy, daddy like coworker, coworker like granny, granny like boyfriend, boyfriend like girlfriend. Once we manage these emotions, we now have to learn how to compartmentalize these emotions to fit the audience in which we're talking to. The next one is social awareness. Now, this is the one that we usually try to skip to first. It's always about the other person, how we want the people on the outside, how I want my girlfriend to make me feel, and what she did wrong, she should know me about this. This is the one that we skip over, and we start at this one, self-awareness. This is empathy and the ability to accurately understand the emotion and perspective of others. Most people call this being able to read the room. So even when we jump to social awareness, we usually have it flipped. We want people to understand me, understand how I feel. And if not, then I'm going to tell you how I feel. And you have to be wrong if you don't understand how I feel. But really, social awareness, for the most part, is being able to read the room. What's going on once I paid my mission at the door, I should already be surmising who is who. How do they feel? What do I think if I did this action, if I said this word, if I use this phrase? I'm pretty much reading the room to make sure that I don't come across offensive, all in the basis of how I feel, right? And of course, the last one, this is where the destination ends at. Like I say, usually people start with social awareness and then relationship management. But I don't care how hard you work on relationship management, if you don't look within yourself and have some self-awareness and be accountable how you feel and how you're distributing your emotions, relationship management just won't work. So what is relationship management? Well, relationship management is using awareness of your own and others' emotions to be able to influence, resolve conflict, and build strong, trusting connections. I will take a little bit more time on that, but I want you to know that part of that relationship management, I hear a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to let anybody change me. Well, if you're practicing emotional intelligence in the correct way in any capacity, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, sometimes we need to be influenced. And sometimes that influence can clash with what we have as our reality. And instead of pushing against it and arguing with it, do we give way to allow relationship management to be able to influence ourselves and others, resolve conflict, and build strong, trusting connections? So as you can see, that's just the 4 pillars of emotion intelligence. All this stuff doesn't happen overnight. I was talking to someone earlier and I'm just like, man, think about how many arguments, disagreements, relationships lost that we tried to sit down in one conversation and do all this at one time without even knowing that there's a proper way and a foundational piece in doing it. So that's the framework of emotional intelligence, the quiet superpower, why emotional intelligence beats IQ every time. We're familiar with IQ. That's how smart we are. How much knowledge can we have? How much knowledge can we regurgitate? How quickly can we solve problems? And that's all well and dandy when it comes to our pocketbooks, but sometimes that doesn't correlate over into our personal lives. And so hopefully that gives you a little framework as we continue to talk about this balance, if you will, of EQ and IQ. So put it like this. If your IQ is your potential, then your emotional intelligence or your EQ is your performance. If you want to maximize your potential based on how well you practice your emotional intelligence and perform that at a high level, it's going to dictate your highest potential in any capacity in life. You'll sometimes hear people say, I'm operating on a high level or a high frequency, low level or low frequency, things of that sort. Well, that's what they're actually alluding to. And of course, everybody wants to think that they're operating on a high frequency, high emotional intelligence. But man, we're going to have to wrap our hands around what does low vibration or low emotional intelligence look like, because we all been there. Right? We're imperfect. We all have our bad days. And the key is not to overlook and think that we don't ever operate on a low frequency, low emotional intelligence. The key to is recognizing once we're there, how can we return back to a high level of emotional intelligence? So think about this. We all know that one brilliant person, right? The absolute genius engineer or numbers wizard who is absolutely impossible to talk to. It's almost like they're so smart till they outsmart themselves. We call these people that all book sense and no common sense, right? They can give you the answer to everything. Everything's happening in the world. They can figure out every problem. But when you get them around people, there are no social skills, right? They couldn't read a social cue if it were written in neon lights. They just don't have those people skills. Now, Why does this matter? It matters because your IQ can solve a complex technical problem, but only your emotional intelligence can solve the communication breakdown that is preventing, your own solution from actually being implemented. So you can have the idea right in your hand, right? It's just like a teacher. The teacher been to school, known and whatnot. And I remember I was seeing some of my colleagues from Paul Quinn, and I think someone put on there, what was your hardest professor, right? And long story short, we were just talking about, a couple of professors came up where they were probably the smartest professor or people on Paul Quinn College campus, but they didn't know how to convey and relate to the typical college student. And therein lies the actual problem. All the IQ awareness in the world, but no emotional intelligence. And so that was an impact, just to be honest, on us as college students. Not only the challenge of the IQ in learning the subject first and foremost, but then if you don't have anyone who can get on your level and understand you from an intellectual level and understand your emotions, then you're fighting two battles at one time. So I thought about that and I was like, well, yeah, we kind of learned something about the subject without even knowing that we were learning about we was learning about life also. So yeah, IQ can only solve the complex technical problem, but your emotional intelligence is going to allow you to take that solution that you came up with, being able to articulate it and communicate it to those that may need it in order that your solution may be implemented. And that's why a lot of times, we'll talk about this a little bit later, why so many times we get stuck in argument, and even sadly to say, so many times relationships end prematurely. It wasn't that the problem hadn't been identified, but no one, either one or the other, or both, didn't have the emotional intelligence to say, okay, how can I articulate it to the opposite person? Or maybe we even lost jobs to where we knew where the solution was, but we didn't know how to articulate it. We got into our feeling so bad to where we put the solution to the side, and now we're just dealing with emotions. And unfortunately, the other person has some power too. They have the power to fire you. They have the power to walk away. They have the power to leave you, or they have the power to clap back. And before you know it, I always say the solution's sitting over there in the corner, and now you all just emotional and sparring. So again, it's very important to understand the importance of why emotional intelligence has to, at the very least, be the foundation in which we're building our IQ on. Now, in my book, Think Better to Be Better, I talk about what I call the decision prism. The decision prism. Every choice you make is filtered through your current emotional state. That's very important to know. That's why it's so important to be self-aware. If I'm upset right now, depending on what you're talking to me about, depending on what you want me to do, my current emotional state is going to be seen and felt through everything that you ask me to do or you want to talk to me about. Even if I end up doing, I can come up with a solution, but based on how I'm actually feeling, it's going to pour out on everything that I actually do. So it's very important to understand that decision prism. Every choice you make is filtered through your current emotional state. So without self-awareness, if I don't know how I'm feeling right now, then am I really making healthy choices? If you lack the first pillar of emotional intelligence, again, which is self-awareness, you're constantly sabotaging without even knowing it, because you're really operating in a low emotional intelligence and you're dealing with more of that emotion. And the problem is a far second, simply because you're mistaking the emotions with pure logic. So your pure logic justifies your inability to deal with your emotions, and therefore your logic can never be articulated to the person that you're actually dealing with. So again, very important to understand the balance of how emotional intelligence, this very thing in 2026, man, what we just kind of cut off. We don't feel, we want to protect our emotions. We're not going to let nobody hurt us again. But as you can see, even starting out, man, and we're going to talk about, we're going to transition to corporate America, whether you admit it or not, or deal with it or not, man, it's good to have emotional intelligence because it affects, or it should affect, everything and every facet that you do, especially when you're dealing with other people and even within yourself. So let's now transition. We're going to talk about three levels: corporate America. We're going to talk about relationships, not just the romantic, but family. But then we're also going to bring it home and talking about ourselves and this quiet superpower, man. This superpower that we all have, but it's so quiet, it's so dormant because, man, we crapped on, we beaten it down, we made it unpopular, and we just made. If I know my IQ, if I have the knowledge, skill set of problem solving, then guess what? That's all I need. But as you can see, emotional intelligence is coming up and trying to hawk down the IQ and let them know that, hey, no, I'm just as important, if not more important. So how does this apply in corporate America, right? Corporate America, the new CEO metrics. A lot of this stuff I pulled from LinkedIn, man. And as you can see, even within certain jobs, it is now transitioned heavily from logic or your IQ to emotional intelligence. In other words, you can do the job, but how do you work well with people? How do you do conflict resolution? If I make you upset, are you going to come in here and try to take everybody's life, right? So even in corporate America, we're realizing that just IQ alone is no longer just a prerequisite to where, hey, you're hired and you have the job. There are some jobs in corporations out there that are now more forward thinking and saying, not only do you need to have the knowledge on how to do this job, but more important, I want to know how you're going to get along with your co-workers. So let's drop these 4 pillars right into the middle of a corporate Zoom call, for example, right? We used to think that the best leader was the one with the highest IQ, right? If you were smart, you figured it all out, you got all the answers, you're the actual leader. The visionary who could calculate quarterly meetings in their head. But like I said, today, the most effective leaders aren't the smartest people in the room. They're the most human people in the room. And that's very important to actually understand. Everyone's here to do a job. And I would like to say, for the most part, if you got the job, you should know how to do the job, or at least at a basic area, at a basic level, excuse me. But the most powerful person in the room is the most human person in the room. That person who actually know how to operate and know how to move with everyone else that's in the room. So how do these 4 pillars actually look like while we're on the clock, while we're at work, so to speak? Well, let's look at self-awareness. Self-awareness is knowing when stress is clouding your judgment before, let's say, for example, you send that passive-aggressive email, or before you walk by that coworker and give them an actual look. Being aware of how you feel can allow you to miss so much drama and so much energy that can be very minor. And like we said earlier, our logic has justified it. That can literally turn into something as serious as a write-up, losing our job. So right from the onset, remember, we jump into the social awareness first, but just being self-aware of these real emotions, because we're having a human moment, all right? We're not saying you shouldn't be human. We all have that coworker that, makes us want to pull our hair out, so to speak, but there's still a responsibility when it comes to self-awareness. And then self-management. This is something I see every day in the profession that I work in. When a client is escalating and going off, self-management is so important to stay disciplined and to stay grounded. And this is the one that you always people hear. I'm gonna return the energy. I'm gonna give that same energy that you give off. That's not what self-management is about. You have people upset and they upset at you. When in reality, they're upset at the issue. But self-management in corporate America allows you to stay calm, cool, and collected and disciplined and grounded so that you can always do your job at a high level. So it's refusing to match this frustrated person or this frustrated coworker or this coworker who said something maybe wrong to you and just becoming an anchor instead, because you're becoming self-aware how you feel. And with self-management, you only can control yourself. And so staying anchored so that you can make sure that you're identifying a true solution and not one that's gonna drag you in. And what about social awareness in corporate America, right? Picking up on those unspoken dynamics in a room. And I think this is the one that, like I said, we have it backwards. We do this more from a judgment standpoint. Sometimes picking up on those unspoken dynamics in the room, we see them, but the mistake we make, I'm going to throw my emotion on it. People have the right to feel how they feel, do what they do, even say what they want to say, right? But social awareness is not only just picking up those unspoken dynamics, but it's knowing, let's say, for example, when your colleague is overwhelmed just by their posture. or when someone's just trying to get up under your skin and you're not giving them that reaction. And so being aware of that intent, again, how can you figure out someone else's intent if you fail to understand yours, again, with self-awareness? And then relationship management, that seems pretty obvious, right? Giving constructive feedback without crushing someone's morale. So again, even if that person offended me, there's still a proper way of doing it. We still got to work together, right? If I say something to offend that person, now we both in HR and this person done drug me in, and now just because of my reaction, I'm just as guilty as them. And so as you can see, these 4 pillars, again, you can have all the know-it-all in the world, but if you don't cuss somebody out at your job, they'll find somebody else with the same IQ as you that can actually do that job, but also have the emotional intelligence to know how to deal with people, even if you were the one that was done wrong. Now, when conflict hits a team, the high IQ person, think about this, just points to spreadsheets, demands everyone to be logical, bunch of facts and figures, and just the HR jargon, right? I don't know if you had a supervisor like that, but it's exhausting. It's like they take the human element and the human emotion out of it, so it's just like all standard procedure and things of that sort. So that's one of the downsides of the high IQ person. They know all the policy, they know all the procedures, they know all the rules and regulations, and so here it is, you're having a real human moment, and they're regurgitating you the HR handbook. Nah, that's not gonna work. That's just like pouring gasoline on a fire. The future of work is not about being a technical expert. The point that I'm making is that it's not just about having a high IQ, knowing how to do the job, knowing how to perform that job at a high level. It's also about being the best technical communicator. So there we go again, pulling that human element, even in our corporate America, right, where we're told that we have to do certain jobs. That human connection has to be there, which it can't be there if we haven't connected with ourselves, right? So now that we've talked about corporate America, let's now turn our attention to relationships, where we're going to have to redefine empathy as being the new rich. Now, the same way in corporate America, we have all the knowledge, we have all the skill set, all the attributes that most people say, hey, you can do that job. One of the gross mistakes that we make in relationship these days is thinking that because it looks good, we can look good, and we have all these things that we're going to have a happy relationship. Let's talk about the romantic relationships, right? And even sometimes friendships, right? We've all seen couples that look completely and absolutely perfect on paper, right? They look like the what's the pictures in the picture frame before you put your picture in? They look like poster picture perfect. Matching IQs, same interests, great jobs. But sad to say, they are utterly miserable together. And that's not ragging or bragging on that. It's really sad if you think not too far back, COVID exposed that, right? Perfect couple coming home all night. We go out, we party here, taking trips, whatnot. But then when COVID sat everybody down, where you actually had to be with that person, communicate with that person, understand that person, I dare say a lot of people realized that they were in a financial contract with strangers, calling it husband and wife, calling it boyfriend and girlfriend, because now you don't have those distractions anymore, right? And so the goal was, instead of fixing inside emotional intelligence, hey, we got all the prerequisites from the outside and everything looks, like it's perfect over here. But the reality of it is, and we probably have some of these people, even in our circle, if we're being honest, they have all the things that we say makes a successful relationship, but they're miserable because their mate don't understand them. They don't understand their mate. They can't sit down and actually talk about their actual emotions. So let's apply our pillars, right? Self-awareness, self-management, self-awareness, and relationship management when it comes to relationships. So let's look at self-awareness. Self-awareness, for example, is realizing that you're not actually mad at your mate, at your loved one. You're mad at their actions. See, that self-awareness right there can solve so many problems. Even if they did something that affected us, we go in on the person and not the action that they did to make us feel some type of way. And what is the natural reaction when we attack a person? Fight or flee, right? We learn that in psychology. So they fight back or they shut down. That's fight or flee in cornbread language, so to speak. The biggest mistake that sometimes, even when we are the one that got offended, we don't have the emotional maturity to identify self-awareness. So we go in and attack the person instead of the action that they did, or we take the action that they did and we beat up on the person, and automatically right there, there's no conversation, there's no conflict resolution. Now you have two people spurring, and like I said, the solution is sitting in the corner. No one's dealing with it. So self-awareness is very important. It's a huge issue when I sit down and I talk to couples, like right off the bat, even when they're trying to talk, when I'm helping them out with my grow from your roots life coaching business, they're talking at each other instead of to each other. You know why? Because they haven't had their emotional intelligence to even deal with their own emotions. Therefore, they won't be able to communicate with themselves. Self-management. Self-management is taking a 3-second pause during an argument instead of launching into a verbal nuke that you may can't take back. Being able to manage what I say and how I say it is night and day when it comes to any relationship. Because when you hurt, when you feel you're being disrespected, when you feel like you're being offended, when you feel like you're not being listened to, again, we take the problem and set it aside. And it's like now we just have an emotional sparring back and forth. And hey, and I'm fighting to cut you, and sometimes I'm trying to give a deadly blow and the problem goes in by itself. So we took a 5-minute issue that could have been resolved. As I always say, let's get to it to get through it. And now we've eventually lost the person that we love. And we're stuck on our emotions, right? Because our logic tells us that we're right, right? I know I'm right. I know I did this right and what have you, but we can't articulate it. So that self-management is very key. And again, keep in mind, I could be on the right side of the argument. I think that's very important to understand. That does not give me permission to throw those verbal nukes in there knowing that I'm trying to hurt my mate because I'm not getting the response or the reaction that I want from them. So that self-management is going to be very key when it comes to our relationships. And then social awareness. This is so key, but if you haven't done these first two, social awareness is going to be out the door the moment that you start arguing, because social awareness is geared around empathy. Being able to know that your partner had a terrible day, right? They could have done something that you don't like, but that's the wrong time to talk about it. I'm pretty sure that their tough day in that moment is going to be more in their mind, and they're going to need to process that before, as soon as they come to the door, you're arguing about dishes being left in the sink or an errand they didn't run. So that social awareness, that's empathy, being able to understand your partner, even when you're disappointed with them, or even when you don't like the action that they did, being able to understand where are they at. Is this the correct time? Is this the proper place? Oh my goodness. Y'all love that stuff on social media where people acting all crazy out in public, and you got about 20 million of these up and people recording, and now when y'all finally cool down, you're gonna have to deactivate your account and get off of social media, because guess what? There was no social awareness. I'm gonna do what I'm doing. I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say in front of people as if there's not gonna be any tomorrow. But hey, I digress on that. So that social awareness, man, is going to be very important. Do I just come in all guns a blazing, or do I recognize, okay, I want to still talk about that? That's still important to me. But it's like they had a hard day. Hey, baby, can I pour you a cup of wine? Or hey, let me take your shoes off and let you get relaxed. I do want to talk to you about something, but hey, we can talk about that later. What can I do? How was your day today? You really have to, your IQ is not going to be able to do that if you don't have the emotional intelligence to go along with it. And then relationship management. Well, that's, you would think be obvious in a relationship, but it's not always obvious. Trust me, I've seen it in my life coaching practice. This is recognizing the daily unglamorous, beautiful work of compromising and nurturing intimacy, right? And that's just a fancy way of saying realizing that we're imperfect. Your mate, your partner, your family, they're not perfect, and neither are you. And so sometimes they're going to fail you. Take them off the hook. Not going to sit there and just beat you up, or the one that we all know, when you do something I don't like, that thing that I forgave you for 2 weeks ago, I'm going to bring that back up. What about you? Well, what about that time? And so now it becomes this thing that, we hold over our partner's head, or it's that trump card that we keep in our back pocket when we know we're wrong and we caught it. So it's almost like we're battling. It's not conflict resolution. We're battling. When I get caught, well, let me pull that trump card. Hey, remember you? That's a conversation from long ago. And so having relationship management is just realizing that you're two imperfect human beings. There are going to be times that each of you get it wrong. No, it don't always have to be at the same time, but we're imperfect, right? At some point in time, even after we talk about it, it's not that our mate is trying to offend us, but sometimes simply because they're imperfect human being, we're going to have to hold that relationship together and manage that relationship just for the simple fact I'm dealing with an imperfect human being just as much I want them to hold me together even when I offend them. So again, as you can see, we talked about the quiet superpower. I hope you guys are seeing how important emotional intelligence is, where we've been just rewarded and we've just stressed the logical side, to being able to know how to do. If I have the knowledge, then that's it. We've almost erased or made it shameful to show emotion these days. But as you can see, and these are just a few examples that I use just for the this episode, I'm pretty sure you can think of numerous examples in your own job, in your own relationship, to where, man, just be honest with yourself. Think about just these 4 pillars, taking them out. Do we always use these 4 pillars? Do we always recognize them? Could you imagine the self-sabotage we've been doing and just operating on pure logic alone by just taking and we're just talking about the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence. We haven't even delved down into emotional intelligence within itself. Very important to be able to have emotional intelligence on the same level, if not, I would say higher level than just our intelligent quotient. Now let's move forward to family and ourselves, right? We talked about corporate, we talked about relationships or romantic relationships, if you will. Now, how can this quiet superpower, emotional intelligence, why EQ, emotional intelligence, beats IQ every time? I struggled on this part because I think this part, in all honesty, can be a whole episode within itself. Because I think your family's I know your family's your first community you come out of, and the good behaviors and the bad behaviors set the foundation for our second and third community, so on and so forth, our friends, our loved ones, our co-workers. And usually this is the one where we just loyally allow logic to abuse and mistreat emotional intelligence. Well, since we family, I know you. Sometimes you have that dynamic in parent and child, and we have to be transparent parents about that. Well, I know you. I raised you. Well, I gave you life. Okay, you do. But there's still emotional intelligence that's needed in the dynamic of that relationship. How you interpret your emotions, how you interpret your feelings, how you interpret discipline to your actual child, to your loved one, right? Even when they get older, they're not that little child anymore. They are a grown adult who probably have their own feelings, their own emotion, their own perspectives. And so in our families, this is one of the worst places where we just put IQ and we just throw EQ or emotional intelligence away. So let's kind of break this down and definitely see if we can balance this thing, because yeah, by technicality, we're family. You know me, or parent, child relationship. Of course you raised me, but that doesn't give you a pass to overlook how I feel, right? So let's talk about family and ourselves. How many times have you been in a heated family argument and someone pulls out that classic line? I mean, this bothers me, but I'm not going to get on my soapbox. That classic line, well, technically I didn't say that. That right there is high IQ logic desperately trying to cover up a low emotional offense. I know I'm wrong, so I have the logic to understand and know that I'm wrong. I offended you. I did that. But by technicality, I didn't say that. No, that's what you said. Now you're just going to gaslight the issue to overlook the fact that you don't want to deal with your emotions of guilt or conviction. And so what happens, on a serious note, We give way of permission in our families to be able to do each other wrong. I was talking to my therapist last night, and we were talking about how in certain family dynamics, those wrongs that are done, when we were children, as we get older, that's what we do. We use the logic, the high IQ logic, just because we went on and it didn't affect us, to be dismissive of those family members who were actually hurt at that time emotionally. And now they struggle with emotional intelligence because they're forced to either feel guilty or to be quiet about the very damage that was done long ago. So another statement, get over it. Just because you filled your life with things that you're good at and doing, you became this good person and you're dismissive of EQ, emotional intelligence. What about that person who's still going through? And then we blame that person when the negative results of these things, such as physical abuse, mental abuse, verbal abuse, incest, all these things that are real tragic things that no one likes to assign to themselves, no one likes talking about. And unfortunately, sometimes even in our Black families, we sweep up under the rug. What does that do for the emotions on both sides? When we're already seeing the importance of how emotional intelligence should be the framework. I don't care how smart you get. If you don't know how to articulate it or deal with human beings, that's the framework of the very world that we live in. And like I said before, keep in mind, this is just our first community. So you know that young lady that you may be quick to label her because she sleeps around? That could be, not saying this is the case for everybody, but that could be someone who dealt with incest and never had a chance to talk about it. And I know that's a delicate situation, but we're going to have to look on the other side of that coin, right? Know that guy that you say, oh, he just got an anger problem, angry Black man. What did he go through that was unresolved? Because the same way we go through college and get our IQ up and that lasts long enough to give us a career, how long do you think those negative things stay with people if undiagnosed? We already don't believe in counseling, right? Because we don't like the stigma that comes with that. How long do you think that lasts on that person? And so now these traits become who the person is. And now when they go in their second communities, because it was normalized in their first community, and now they take it to their second communities, and now they run into people who have high emotional intelligence, recipe for disaster. So not everybody who hurt you intentionally, but hurt people hurt people. And because we don't use social awareness anymore, see, we don't have empathy anymore. Somehow, somewhere, we confuse to understand wrong means we agree with the wrong. No, I can still say that is wrong, that action is wrong, but I best be trying to understand it. That is the definition of social awareness. Because if I never understand the wrong, the only thing that I have identified is how I feel when that wrong is done toward me. And I'm going to say this, and I mean this, no offense to someone. That's why you see certain people, or we're guilty in ourselves, getting into the same relationship with the same type of person. Because we only identified how we felt when that thing happened. But we never took time to understand self-awareness. Why does this make me feel? How do I feel in that actual moment? Self-management. What do I do, or what should I do, even if it's to the point of me getting some help? So we find ourselves in that vicious cycle. So we have to make sure, and a lot of times this starts within our families. Just because the wrongdoing is done does not mean we should not understand it. Just apologizing for incest is not the solution. Just apologizing for being a bad parent or being physically abusive toward a child or a loved one in your family is not enough. You have to understand the why. And that's why you see what you call it generational curses, or these traits being passed down from generation to generation. It's all because that emotion has been cut off a long time ago. And just because I know and I can do, then I kick you down the road to it. And so look at the tragedy that we put into these second communities, where we are now starting to identify, relationship, love, husband, wife, and these things. Where we're now on that job, right? I learned within my family, if you get cussed out, hey, we yell, we go backwards and forward, and we're trying to say the most harmful words. So now we take that into our second community. But now you have a woman who comes from a background where, guess what, raising their voice. No, we don't do that. But guess what? You think that that's how it goes, and this can be the love of your life without even knowing it. But learn behavior. The IQ is the only thing that matters, right? We don't need to discuss emotion intelligence. Think about going into the corporate world. Someone offends me in my family, we argue, we yell, we cuss, we fight. Now here you go in the corporate world, good paying job and all. Now you ain't gonna let you punk me. Ain't nobody gonna talk to me like that. And now you sitting in HR. And like I said from the top of the hour, it could be very much well that person triggered you. But again, only thing we celebrate is IQ, right? We don't talk about emotion until we don't talk about self-awareness. We don't talk about self-management, social awareness, relationship management. So in my humble opinion, that's why I say the family the last when it comes to when it comes to the four pillars of emotional intelligence, because I think this is where those bad seeds or good seeds are planted right here. And I don't think we talk about them enough because, and this is a whole nother topic, we practice loyalty more than we do love, even in our friendships. Hey, the time together, just like family, well, I couldn't control the time. We grew up together. Or sometimes even our friendships, a frat or a sorority sister or Masonic brothers. But hey, we got all this time since college, and that equates. What do they equate to? What does it equate to? Because if we're not doing the work every day to grow that bond in any capacity, that's all we have is time. And a lot of times we give way to that loyalty so much that we justify not using emotional intelligence as the foundation in those relationships. And you guys, unfortunately, we take that into every community we go to. In some rooms, yeah, like I said, we said at the top of the hour, we could get in with IQ. I can get in a relationship with a young lady who loves me. Can I keep her? I can find the man, speaking of women, that I want to be with, but you know how to keep him. And because we deal in such low emotional intelligence these days, we're trying to tell each other how to be a good gender toward each other, and we ain't even checked ourselves to say if I'm a good man to you first, or you're a good woman to me first. We're trying to tell the opposite gender where they go wrong. You see it on social media. A good man is this, a good woman will never. A good man is this. Are you a good person? Do you have emotional intelligence within your own emotions? So yeah, like we said before, IQ can get us in the room, but quite frankly, once we're in the room, what happens next? And unfortunately, you guys, when it comes to family, yeah, we endure all that stuff and things of that sort. But when we grow up, some cases, we leave family behind. And I think that's one of the most sad tragedies that we see here in America and throughout the world, to where there's so much vitriol and there has been such a lack of emotional intelligence. Our family, our loved ones, we've escaped them into our second and third community to where we're avoiding them altogether. So let's quickly look at the four pillars as it relates to the family unit. Self-awareness, knowing exactly again why your family member triggered you and preparing for it. Sometimes, like I said, sometimes we just deal with evil people. There's no excuse. There's no whatever. But then if someone just even that just hurt, I still got to prepare for it. That still don't justify me. Or what if it's someone who just needs help? Into wellness. It's what I talk about. Matter of fact, that's one thing that inspired me to write my second book on Think Better to Be Better, a guide to mental wellness. It's transparent. I see the lack of mental wellness in my family from things that I knew we grew up with. But I'm surely not going to treat my family members who haven't healed or dealt with their mental wellness. And it's important I say mental wellness. Mental illness, let the doctors do the diagnosis. But there are just some people who are not mentally well because they just don't know how to practice mental illness. Having known that, I'm not going to treat them as if they're intentionally doing it. I still have to prepare for it. Still may have to set up some boundaries. Still have to maybe sometimes put some distance. But again, social awareness. I'm going to use empathy. And this is where it breaks families. We believe in understanding the wrongdoing of that person. How dare us? Oh, ain't nothing wrong with that person. Ain't nothing wrong with they mind. I went through the same thing. Oh, we've now thrown that person away. You think it makes that person want to go get help or dig deeper? We talked about that earlier. You attack me, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to attack you. Problem set to the side. So it's very important for us to understand how important these four pillars are in that first community, because it, quite frankly, Erickson psychosocial theory, that's one of my favorite theories in psychology, where it says, depending on how you master or not master, and I'm paraphrasing, the first stage you are in life is going to dictate how well you are successful or how much you fail on the second level, and so on and so forth. Every stage, depending on how well you fail and or pass, is going to dictate how successful or lack of success you're going to have in that second stage. And I think that's the same thing that comes in mind when it comes to where we just put IQ over emotional intelligence in that first community. When we go to our second community of relationships, friends, we're going to pick the wrong friends. We're going to pick friends with similar traits. And then we laugh at it. Well, why is she with the same type of person? Well, guess what? That's all she knows. That's all he know. No one stepped in and had these conversations of the four pillars and things of that sort. Why'd that person do that on their job? They had a good paying job. Well, guess what? That's who I'm being real. I ain't gonna let nobody change me. You know, messed up your money, being real. Okay. Self-management, being the stabilizing force at chaotic times instead of adding to the panic. That's something I preach all the time. Why add on to it? See, that's where we get it wrong, when we give permission that, since I know how you going, I know how Annie's gonna act. Well, why would I throw gas on that fire? Because I don't have any self-awareness. Therefore, I can't manage my emotions. So that way, at this next Thanksgiving, if Annie started doing, and I'm just giving an example, shout out to my Annies out there using that example. I don't want no phone calls. But the next time I see them, guess what? Now I messed up whole Thanksgiving, because guess what? I'm gonna match that energy, right? When self-management could be saying, okay, I know that. Even when we shouts out to, we did a podcast on toxic traits around the holiday time, and it was a very powerful one, where we talked about even those triggers around the holiday time. If we're not careful, we give way to giving ourselves permission to add gas to the fire, and now we done ruin it for everybody, simply because no one chooses to regulate those emotions. So yeah, self-management is very important. Again, even if the wrongdoing was done toward you, doesn't give us permission to clap back. And then social awareness, understanding, for example, and I go back and I use the example of parenting, understand that your teenager's needs could be vastly different and be a vastly different kind of emotional support than an aging parent. What I did and what I needed when I was the age of my son is vastly different than what my son needs at the age of 23. My 23 and his 23 is light years, two different worlds. And so that social awareness, that empathy, that taking back and understanding, although there are some things that my son do, I do not like unequivocally. But I have to have the social awareness or the empathy, understanding this is the world that he lives in. So now how do I navigate that into my parenting skills, in this case with family, in guiding him and articulating what my standards are and my needs are. Not, I'm the parent, I'm going to make you. That don't work. That just push him off into it. But that's a conversation for another day. But how do I use that empathy and understanding and articulating, this is how I feel? And remember what we said, that's found in social awareness. Influence. Is there a way that I can influence him to, even if he don't make those decisions right now when I want him to, that later on in life, he'll remember something that daddy said and make that change on his own. So we could go on, you guys, when it comes to family. That's one of the ones that's close and dear to my heart, because I really do believe that that is the foundation, if you will, when we start looking at emotional intelligence versus IQ in our second and third community, so on and so forth. But I want to end on another note, because it gets deeper than family. And as much as I stress the one with family, I think we overlook how we talk to ourselves. I really do think we take that for granted. It's almost like it's the given part of the equation. And that's dangerous, because if you don't sit down and learn this stuff, right, you can say your ABCs over and over and over and memorize them just based on the sound or the pattern or what have you. That don't mean you'll know how to read. That don't mean you'll know how to spell. And so a lot of times, even within ourselves, And this is something I'm guilty of. You can have all the knowledge in the world. If you don't know how to communicate it, if you don't know how to articulate it for yourself, those who become everything to everyone becomes nothing to no one. Because you're trying to appease everybody else. And if you look deeply and you do some soul searching, it's simply because you can't do it for yourself. And so that's not being selfish. It's deeper than family. As much as I would love my own family to do this, do that, I think me and my siblings talked about that the other day in a text thread. I'm responsible for me. Talked about it with my therapist also last night. I'm responsible for me. I have a twin sister. I have two younger brothers. I have an older sister. My mother's my only parent that's living. I love them to death. But ultimately, I have to put myself first in order for me to choose what I can do and can't do for them. And so I really want to stress that and make sure that we're not underestimating how do we talk to ourselves? Like when we fail, do we berate ourselves with logic? The one that I hate the most, and I do mean hate. You should have known better. We're imperfect. Who got a perfect mind? We all have memory lapses, giving ourselves that grace. So even when we fail, do we beat ourselves up? Because words have power. The word tells you that the tongue cuts like a double-edged sword. Well, if it cut as a double-edged sword on someone else, and we can rip somebody else apart, think about the words we say up here without even them coming out of our mouths. How much is it cutting us up, beating up our confidence, taking the power from us, right? I should have known better. The probability was obvious. I'm an idiot. We say all these things. And remember what we said before, we're not going to use that excuse. You know what I mean? No. Words have power. Whether we think it has that impact now or later. Come on, parents. Talked about that. Speaking over life over our kids. Are we speaking out our frustration on our kids? Or can we separate and use emotional intelligence and separate our frustration and speak life? When our loved one do something wrong, do we attack the person? Or can emotional intelligence allow us to know we are responsible for our own emotions, not the other person? Now let me articulate how this made me feel to the person. Or do we just lash out at the person? All of this comes from how do we speak to ourselves. And because we don't literally walk around, some of us walk around speaking out loud to ourselves, soon as we think it, we give it permission. And think about over a period of time, when you fail, you beat yourself up, you give yourself no grace, and you're now learning this language subconsciously. Always remember, true power is not managing a team of hundreds. True power is managing your own internal weather. So often we have lost it and been misconstrued that based on the reaction I want from other people, this is what I'll do. No, find out who you are first. What do you like, what you do not like? And then based on that, go find the people who can live in harmony with that or improve that. Because at the end of the day, yes, people should do each other right and all that from a moral standpoint. But look at our dude in office. We do not live in a world that lives by that creed. So ultimately, the only person that we can change in any narrative is ourselves. Really, really focus on the fact that if you're a constant lightning rod for other people's storms, you have no true authority in your own life. If you're always starting up fires, and I'm talking about even the ones that inadvertently, if you're always starting fires and chaotic and whatnot, I always tell people, I used to have people come and talk to me, saying, what's going on in my life? I feel like everything's going wrong. What do I need to do? Be still. Be still. Because sometimes we can be too good of a good person and think that if I'm not doing something wrong intentionally, then I should get good results. Sometimes you can do the wrong thing simply because you don't have the knowledge. Sometimes you can have the knowledge, but like we talked about all night, I don't know how to manage the emotion that come with that. You know, like we want the high paying job and, you know, the job that allows us to do all this. But then when that job is taxing and taking so much from our lives, and now the very life, we're just renting the life because the job really owns the lifestyle just to upkeep it. So we pick a few days, weekends, or a week at best to rent our life, only to go back to work to make that money back so I can rent my life at a later time. But hey, the outside looks pretty, right? You know, Instagram is full of pictures and things of that sort. And again, that's not to be demeaning from wanting to do good things for yourselves, What I'm saying is that we have to get a balance to where our emotional intelligence at any capacity, we can manage the emotion within ourselves so we can be able to step out and be able to better understand people, whether they agree or disagree, whether they do us right or wrong. That's not a prerequisite for us just throwing our emotions away and just causing all these fires around us to where we're burning our own proverbial house down. All right. I want to leave you guys with this. Understand, look, you're both heart and brain. Let's get out of this misnomer of, especially, and I will say this, especially us as black men. And I am proud to say that I am seeing more black men. I definitely appreciate it in my circle where we are giving ourselves permission to be okay with sharing our emotions, talking about our emotions, validating our emotions. We're not weak. And we're not all these derogatory words that I won't say on my platform. No, we're human. So we're both heart and brain. That doesn't come with a gender, right? It's not based on a gender. It's not based on all these things that we put out here, how much we have in our pocket, who are we over in social status, how much money we have compared to other person. No, we are both heart and brain, and managing and mastering the friction between them is the only real path in order for us to actually grow as human beings. So when it's all said and done, man, let's bring it home, right? We've talked about corporate America and how the four pillars can affect us, and we've given examples there. We talked about in our relationships, clearly that second and third community, how the four pillars are definitely influential there, even if we have the logic. You know, I mean well, and I'm a good guy, I'm a good woman, and I can treat you right. We can have all that good knowledge, but if we don't have emotional intelligence, it's all for naught. And then we came back down to that first community we come out of, our family, how it's important there, how this is where some of the learned behavior sets up to either the success or the failures in our second and third, so on and so forth, community. And then we finally took a step back and just looked at ourselves in the proverbial mirror. You know, how do we talk to ourselves? How do we speak to ourselves? How do we treat ourselves, right? All important. And again, those four pillars have just been echoing throughout tonight. But let's bring it on home. As a master life coach, I promise you that how we carry ourselves sets the tone for every single room that we walk into. I guarantee you. What happens in that room, what all you attain in that room, what do you lose in that room, sometimes we cannot control that. But I promise you, how we carry ourselves sets the tone for every room that we walk into. High emotional intelligence looks like authentic confidence without arrogance. It looks like owning your mistakes gracefully. It looks like bouncing back from setbacks without needing to blame someone else. Self-accountability. So as you can see, high emotional intelligence, it really doesn't start with the next person to the left or right of us. High emotional intelligence start on doing the work within ourselves. So my challenge for you this week is to move beyond the calculations. Stop saying, what is the logical solution? And start asking, what is the human variable prevent this solution from working? So in other words, don't just look at the logic of it. Hey, you wrong. Hey, you did me wrong. What's the human element? What's within me that makes that look, feel some type of way? What in me makes me not like that every time you do that? And then communicate that with that person. What is the human variable presenting this solution from working? Because understand, even if you get a polite apology and move on and that keeps happening again, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different response? Ladies and gentlemen, we have to take the time to do this. Everything is not going to be resolved and communicated in 140 characters or less. We have to start normalizing some of these things that we now crap on or demean as if it's now popular to be dumb. It's popular to operate in low emotional intelligence. It's popular to tell you how exactly I feel in 4 words or not. That's impossible. So in order to do this challenge correctly, we may have to move logic out the way. Logic say, hey, we're going to sit there in 5 minutes, time each other, and then if we're going to get it resolved, move logic out the way. Let's sit down, let's talk about it. You know, my friend, let's get to it to get through it. Even if we got to table it, we may not finish it all tonight, but hey, we're going to lay a foundation. So I challenge you guys, go beyond just the calculation and the logic. No one's knocking your intellect, but it's your emotional intellect that you may find that needs some healing, some learning, some adjustments, or may need to be built altogether based on where you at in your life. And remember, your IQ sets your goals in life, but your emotional intelligence determines how you treat yourself and others while you pursue them. Your IQ identifies your potential, but your emotional intelligence defines your impact. So today, don't just ask yourself what you know, ask yourself what you're making and how you're making people feel. You guys, if this episode touched your heart and not just your head, please share it. It helps out so much. Send it to that person in your life who is all logic and no connection. You know, that person who has all the book sense in the world, but when they around people, they have no people skills. So if you think it'll be a blessing to them, share it to them. Let's connect. Let's make connection contagious. Right? In my book, Think Better to Be Better, it'll be linked in the description. And the first 5 chapters is really going to change your life, because in there I go deeper and I really go exhaustive, because again, we just talked about the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence to be able to understand the vast topic of emotional intelligence. But now I really go there and give you a great foundation of what fully emotional intelligence looks like. And then we pair off into, in this book, we go into relationships, we go into self-development and things of that sort. And do I want to say this right now? Well, I guess I guess it wouldn't be breaking news, but I do have some books that will be coming out later on in the year, where we specifically talk about mental wellness and emotional intelligence in the workplace. And then we also talk about it from a male standpoint. And then we have a book to where we talk about it from a woman's standpoint. So those are some projects that are later on down the line. But ultimately, we just want to get the foundation, you guys. Let's make it popular talking, learning, exploring, having intellectual conversation, right? Not just the book sense. Once I got there, we're not set. We still have some more work to do. So please like, subscribe, and review. Let's grow together. And one last thing before I get out of here. Look, I want to give a huge shout out again. Thank you for all the prayers, the text messages, the phone calls. They meant a lot from the Hester family to you all. And as we were dealing with burying my uncle, we was able to get through that and navigate that. And so still keep us in your prayer, or pray with us, not keep us in your prayer, but pray with us as we continue to navigate that. And I also want to give a huge shout out, you guys, to Jay's Corner community. As you guys, some of you guys may not know, but back in December, I entered into the Entrepreneur of Impact contest. And this is where they're taking, I will say, young entrepreneurs. I'm not so young, but I'm young enough. But no, seriously, they're taking newly found entrepreneurs that have their own LLCs and business ideas. And they're doing a contest where, for the most part, they're growing us with people that can help us out. And so ultimately, there's a cash prize in the end and some wonderful tools and networks for the contest that they have us doing. And I am proud to say, you guys, if I would have came in just 100 place, I would have been ecstatic, to be honest, because this is all across the United States. And I am proud to say that as of tonight, Central Standard Time, I am in 8th place. And so I say from the bottom of my heart, that is not just something that I've done. That is for people like you that is liking, that is sharing, that is going, clicking the links that's found in my social media for whatever reason, for whatever's touched you, for whatever you like, that's impacted you, impacted your loved ones, and you're voting for me for the simple fact that you enjoy what I do and you want to see me grow and do even greater things on a greater scale. So I humbly say, if I stay in 8th place, if the Lord say the same, just coming to 8th place and knowing that I have that type of support out there, starting off very new, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you all. So keep rocking with me here on Jay's Corner. I want to thank you guys. I love you so much. Until next time, remember, to have a better world, we must think first and feel better. Remember, it is always better to be allies than it is to be adversaries. You guys take care of yourself on Jay's Corner.